Hey everyone, I'm Kim, the mom boss behind EmeryandK. Well, welcome back to my channel. Today's Tumbler tutorial is going to be painting some watercolor-esque flowers. I promise this is super simple. I will list and link everything I use in the description box below. I'll have some discount codes for you down there as well. Let's get to it. As always, you're going to want to go ahead and start with a fully prepped tumbler. Today I am using a 12-ounce Shorty from Magnolia. Now this one came already prepped, and that is such a luxury. We are going to be applying this brand new fusion from the glitter guy. It is called Cahoots. Myself and the rest of the creative team actually put this fusion together, and it is one of my favorite glitters, hands down. It is absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to be applying my glitter today using spray adhesive. I prefer the Krylon brand. I will make sure to link that in the description box. I do have a video that goes a little bit more in depth on how to do spray adhesive if you're not familiar with it, but it's super simple. So I am going to just apply my glitter. Once this is dried, about a half an hour, I will spray a coat of my Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss over it, let that dry, and then I will put a coat of epoxy on it. And once that coat of epoxy is cured, we will be ready to paint our flowers. Now, don't be intimidated by this. I promise it's super simple. So I'm just using a little old paintbrush. It doesn't really matter what size. You don't want something gigantic, but anything will do, really. And then I have this little paint tray from Dollar Tree. Now I'm going to grab alcohol inks. We're doing olive green, dark blue green, amethyst, Bordeaux, and pearl. And this pearl is optional. I just use a little tiny bit, so if you don't have it, don't worry about it. You're also going to want to have some rubbing alcohol on hand and, of course, your tumbler. You'll see here the bottom of mine is sanded because I don't know what happened, but I got a wicked wobbly bottom, so I had to sand it. But it's fine if you end up sanding yours. You don't have to do another coat of epoxy. If your coat of epoxy isn't perfectly smooth either, don't worry about it. This will be totally fine to go right with your inks. So I'm going to put a few drops of my amethyst, and then I'm going to put some drops of Bordeaux in there as well. Here's a little extra tidbit. When you're opening your alcohol inks, just use your weeding tool to gently poke them down instead of cutting them. I have friends who say they cut them, and that is terrifying to me. So just poke it with your weeding tool. So I'm just putting a few drops of each color into my little paint tray. Now, I was inspired to paint lupines. I live in Maine, and lupine are one of my favorite flowers. It is my grandmother's favorite flower, and it is almost lupine season, so that's the flower I went with. If you want to do a different flower, you absolutely can. Your craft room, your rules. So I'm literally just going to grab some of this amethyst, and I'm going to start putting on little like blobs onto my tumbler. When I tell you guys this is super simple, it is super simple. So a lupine is kind of like an elongated triangle shape almost, and there is some little spaces in between the little petals, but I'm not going to worry too much about how it looks. I really want to just kind of turn my brain off and let myself get creative with this. I find, especially making art, that I overthink things all the time. In general life, I overthink things also, but in art, I tend to get like this perfectionist attitude, and you don't have to do that. Just let your brain relax, dab on your little inks. I promise you it's going to be beautiful. So I'm going to continue to work my way around the tumbler. You can see I kind of mixed amethyst and Bordeaux there in a separate little cup. I don't want to have a pattern. That's kind of the only thing I'm trying to avoid here, is having like an A-B pattern for my flowers. So I'm just kind of mixing colors. I'm not washing my brush in between. You can add on other colors if you want to. Like I said, your craft room, your rules. Now I do want to do some that are a little bit kind of like tilty, because when you see a field of lupines, there are kind of all different stages of them, where there are some that are perfectly straight up and down, and then there are some that are starting to kind of wilt and tip a little bit. So I thought that would add a little bit of character to this tumbler. So I'm going to go ahead and finish painting my lupines, and then we will move on to the next step. Once I'm happy with my lupine, I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush in some rubbing alcohol just to get that purple and pink out of there. And now we're going to add a few drops of each of our greens into our little paint palette. We are going to be adding some greenery at the bottom of our Lupine, and we're also going to be adding some little green details in our Lupine as well. So when you look at a field of lupines, you see a lot of green because you can see the stem of the lupine through all the little tiny like blooms on the lupine, if that makes sense. In my head, I know what I'm talking about. So at the top of the lupine, there are also little flowers that haven't opened up yet that are also green. So I'm going to add a little bit of green little blobs at the top of each lupine. Now, again, I'm not going to overthink this. I'm just going to start dabbing a little bit of green here and there into open spaces in my lupine where I can add a little bit more color, I think, and I'm just adding a little bit to the top. I am not going to get into my own head and overthink this too much. So I'm going to go ahead and add these little details to each lupine, and then I'm going to go right across the bottom and just do kind of some little X's to add some greenery. The flowers of a lupine, or excuse me, the stem of the lupine with the leaves, they're kind of like little X shapes. So I'm just going to kind of emulate that on my tumbler. I'm just going to get it to a point where I think it's pretty. And of course, you're going to do the same. Don't overthink it. I promise it's easier if you don't. Once I'm happy with how my greenery looks, I'm going to go ahead and rinse my paintbrush, and now I'm going to go in and use a little bit of this pearl. This is just kind of an additive. It gives it a little bit of extra shimmer. So I'm going to put this into spots that I want to. I don't really have a plan for this, just adding a little bit of depth here and there. And I'm also going to grab a little bit of my Amethyst and my Bordeaux and add that in where I think it needs to be, or if I want to build a little bit of depth, again, layering my inks is how I'm going to get that. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through, refine my flowers until I am happy, and then I will be totally finished. Now, I don't seal my inks. If you typically do seal your inks, by all means, go ahead and seal them. Once my flowers are finished, I will go ahead and put 2 more coats of epoxy on this tumbler, and it will be totally done. You guys see, I said it was so easy, and I wasn't lying. One thing when I am putting epoxy on this tumbler over my raw inks, I'm going to be careful not to overwork my epoxy so that I don't make my inks run. That's the only time I ever have issues with my inks running, is if I overwork my epoxy once it's on my tumbler. So I will just do a good scoop on my tumbler. I'll run my hand around it once horizontally, then I'll do one finger up vertically just to smooth it out, and I will torch it and I will let it be. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, maybe a little bit inspirational. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on my video. If you want to see more tutorials in the future, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, happy crafting.